Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is the third of my new series about the transition from the Shang dynasty to the Zhou dynasty more than 3,000 years ago. In my first video on this series, I talked about the culture change from the authordom of the Shang people to the phoenix, symbolizing the arrival of the saved king for the Zhou people. In my second video, I explained the brutal practice of human sacrifices conducted by the Shang kings, and the rationale underpinning such practice, and addressed the following questions as an attempt to explain the transition from the Shang to the Zhou dynasty. So these questions are: who were the Shang people? Why would the Shang kings practice human sacrifice? What were the religious and political rationales of such practice? How were human sacrifice carried out? I also invited my audience to ask questions related to this topic in my second video. I'm very happy to receive a few very interesting questions from Jerry K., one of my loyal followers. So thank you, Jerry. Here is the updated list of my questions that integrated your questions. For any of my audience, if you have any question you would like to ask, I would be very happy to include your questions and address them in my future videos. In today's video, I'll continue my investigation of this monumental transition from the Shang to the Zhou dynasty by addressing the following 4 questions. How widely human sacrifice was practiced by the Shang people? Who were the victims? Where were they from? How were they caught? Why Duke Zhou and King Cheng abandoned the human sacrifice practice? To have a more focused account, my talk is developed around the last question: what are the consequences of sacrificing King Wen's eldest son, Prince Yi? I'm Dr. Gao, a philosopher specialized in classical Chinese philosophies and poetry, professional ethics, and the philosophy of medicine. I make videos about the classical Chinese poetry, Chinese history and philosophies, and the philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine. Please click the like button and subscribe my channel. Your support is very important to me. If you have any questions, please contact me. Here's my email address. Now, let's look at the first question for today. How widely human sacrifice was practiced by the Shang people? As you might know by now, the Shang kingdom was fundamentally a theocratic kingdom. That is, the Shang kings were not just the rulers of the human world, but also the high priest who represented the divine power in the human world. The Shang kings were regarded as gods once they passed away and ascended to the heaven. These died Shang kings wielded immense power over the king in reign, regarding not only the welfare of the royal clan, but also the fate of the whole Shang kingdom. That is why King Wuding arranged a Minghun or post-mortal marriage between his dead wife Fu Hao to one of his dead ancestors to ensure a military alliance between the Shang and Fu Hao's natal tribe. And the last Shang king, Shou, was willing to offer himself as a sacrifice to the gods. That is, his dead ancestor, to save his kingdom. According to Dr. Shuo, human sacrifice was widely accepted by the Shang people and practiced not only by the royal family but also by other aristocrats, as well as the commoners. Human sacrifice was how the Shang people communicated with divine power and ensured that they got the blessing of the divine power for any of their endeavors, be it military campaign, hunting, building important structures, or foraging weapons, etc. Dr. Li Shuo reports that the human remains are discovered in commoners' workshops and residential areas, along with remains of other animals, such as dogs and pigs. He reports that in today's Anyang, in ruins, many pits of human sacrifice are discovered in a pottery manufacturing site. In a residential area of a minor aristocrat called 大司空村, remains of 86 children are discovered under the foundation of 14 residential buildings, indicating sacrificing children when laying the foundation of important buildings was a common practice for the aristocrats. But the most significant role of human sacrifice was to demarcate the Shang people from other tribal people. The early Shang people's human sacrifices were mostly for practical purposes, as I listed above. However, as the Shang territory expanded, the religious and political functions of human sacrifice became more and more important. Human sacrifice was not only an offer for the gods, but also performed in ceremonies for accepting a tribal people as a legit member of the Shang kingdom. Dr. Li Shuo claims that one such ceremony was when King Wen was awarded the title of Xibo Hou, or the Marquis of the West. It was at this ceremony King Wen's eldest son, Bo Yikao, was sacrificed. Dr. Li argues that, unlike the currently accepted story that King Wen was duped to eat the flesh of his son Bo Yikao, King Wen ate Bo Yikao's flesh at the ceremony. It was after this ceremony that the Zhou people was accepted as a member of the Shang kingdom, and the Zhou people was allowed to offer sacrifice to the Shang gods and received the blessing from the Shang gods. Furthermore, King Wen's two younger sons, King Wu Jifa, the Duke of Zhou Jidan, also ate their brother's flesh at the ceremony, and this horrible event was recorded in the hexagram in the Book of Changes. Before I tell this terrifying event, I would like to give you a bit of history of the Zhou people. As I mentioned briefly in my first video of this series, the Zhou people originated from the Bin area among many other tribal people whom the Shang kings referred as the barbarian Qiang, which literally representing people who herd the goats on the west and northwest to the Shang kingdom. According to Dr. Li, King Wen's grandfather, Gu Gong Dan Fu, or Grandpa Dan, was the one surrendered to the Shang king. The character Zhou was the name used for these newly surrendered people by the Shang kings. The character Zhou is the combination of the character Yong and Kou. As we already know from my second video, the character Yong was a generic term of human sacrifice in the oracle bone scripts, and one of the most frequently appeared term in the oracle bone scripts was Yong Qiang, or to sacrifice Qiang. Dr. Li claimed that the Zhou people was the supplier of human victims for the Shang kingdom. Some more terrifying oracle bone scripts of the character Zhou have the dripping blood in this character like these ones. The other Qiang people from the west and the northwest then become the hunting games of the Zhou people. Dr. Li also presents many archaeological evidences that the chieftains of the Zhou people hunted these Qiang people. Here is a piece of oracle bone recording a divination result for hunting the Qiang. 真我用网符 divination. We use a net to catch victims. In the Book of Changes, King Wen also recorded hunting for Qiang victims in many of the hexagrams. For instance, the hexagram Jin recorded a hunting expedition. My rendering of the original text for this hexagram is based on Dr. Li's interpretation. Now, let me read the text of this hexagram. Remember, we start from the bottom. 初六，进如，吹如，贞吉，往复，遇，无咎。First line, to advance, destroy, and auspicious results. Caught many victims in net, no error. 六二，进如，酬如，贞吉，受至戒福，余气王母。Second line, to advance gloomily, auspicious results, receiving blessing from Queen Mother. 六三，众允，毁亡。Third line, everyone agrees with the leader, no regret. 九四，进如硕鼠，真利。Fourth line, advance as stealthily as big rats, warning divination results. 六五，毁亡，失德勿续，往极无不利。Fifth line, no regret, do not worry for loss or gain, going with auspicious signs and benefits from every action. 上九，尽其脚，为用伐役，立即无咎，真令。Sixth line, advance with horns lowered, attacking the town. There is no error in auspicious or inauspicious results. Divination results are hard to decipher. Another hexagram, Shu, records detailed hunting techniques in tracking down and eventually catching the victims. Now, let me read the text of hexagram Shu. 初九，须臾教，利用衡，无咎。First line, ambush at the suburb, benefits from patience, make no error. 九二，须臾杀，小有言，终极。Second line, ambush under the sand, there was a bit of argument, but end up good. 九三，须臾泥，自扣字。Third line, ambush in the mud, wait until the enemy arrives. 六四，须臾血，出自血。Fourth line, soaked in blood, wait for the victim coming out of their caves. 九五，须臾九十，贞吉。Fifth line, enticing the enemy with wine and food, auspicious results. 上六，入于穴，有不速之客三人来，尽至终极。Sixth line, entering my cave, three unexpected guests arrive. Respect them and end up auspiciously. The character she initially represents a sweating person who has been waiting patiently for the right time to act. This is why I render it sometimes as ambush, such as when it is used to describe the hunters waiting for their victim in the first three lines. In the fourth line, I translate the character as soaked because it is used to describe the hunters soaked in the blood of their victims. Hexagram Xu clearly indicates that they were attacking a Qiang community, probably killing many of the victims because they were soaked in the victim's blood, and they also trying to catch people who were hiding in their caves. While the fifth line, Dr. Li interpreted Xu as entice because it is related to wine and food. The last line, according to Dr. Li, allures to the visit by three Shang officials who invited Gu Gong Dan Fu, or Grandpa Dan, to join the Shang kingdom. As you can see from the text, these entries list different techniques of catching victims that might be passed down from Grandpa Dan to King Wen's father to King Wen and his sons. The Zhou people did not have their own writing system. According to Dr. Li Shuo, King Wen was the first one learned the Shang divination techniques and the oracle bone scripts in the secrecy while he was detained at the Shang capital. I'll relate Dr. Li Shuo's story about this and the evidences he presents in his book in my next video about the King Wen's secret plot to overthrow the Shang. Anyhow, once King Wen learned the Shang's written language, he noted down these techniques. Dr. Li also mentioned several other hexagrams that mentioned the hunting and sending victims to the Shang capital by the Zhou people. He argues that the Zhou chieftain had been catching victims for the Shang kings for many years, and they often expected to catch 50 or more victims at a time. A piece of oracle bone is discovered in a site that is identified as King Wen's residence at Zhouyuan. This oracle bone recorded a divination question before they went out hunting. 8月辛卯古曰：其梦起，往昔，王就，获其50人。Divination result on the 28th day states, my dream predicts we should go west. No error. Would we catch 50 men? Apparently, such hunting went on for many years, from Grandpa Dan, King Wen's father, to King Wen and his sons. However, the sacrifice of Bo Yikao was the event that started the long process of ending this terrifying practice, initiated by Duke Zhou and King Cheng. According to Dr. Li Shuo, King Wen recorded the whole event of sacrificing his eldest son Bo Yikao in one hexagram in Yi Jing, or the Book of Changes. That is the hexagram Gen. Now, let's look at the character Gen. The oracle script of Gen is a big eye on top of a person. It represents a person looking at something either in shock or with anger, or both. Its meaning changed over time. Confucius interpreted the character as stop or still. Hans interpreted as a symbol of mountain. Hence, all the commentaries since Confucius keep this interpretation. This hexagram becomes a statement about the virtue of being like a stately mountain, which is kept in the Book of Changes until today. Now, let's look at the popular interpretation of this hexagram today. Let me read the text from the bottom. 初六，艮其子，无咎，立永贞。First line, stealing his toes, there is no trouble. Beneficial for permanent determination. 6.2更欺非，不逞其谁，其心不快。Second line, stealing his calves, not raising aloft his rent flesh. His heart is not glad. 9.3更欺陷，猎其淫，利熏心。Third line, stealing his midsection, scratching his spine, danger, smoke the heart. 6.4更欺身，无救。Fourth line, stealing his torso, there is no trouble. 6.5更欺腐，言有序，毁亡。Fifth line, stealing his cheeks, words have sequence, regret is gone. 上9敦更，急。Sixth line, thick tooth, auspicious, 挂齿，更其背，不获其身，行其庭，不见其人，无救。Hexagram statement, looking back at him, but could not touch his body. Walking on his courtyard, but not seeing his person. There is no trouble. As you can see, the statement for the whole hexagram and for each line reads rather weird. Many of them do not make sense, especially with the third line. All the other lines are about keeping parts of the body still, or calm, or tranquil, as interpreted by Wen. However, why is there a line about smoking the heart? Whose heart is this? In the statement about the whole hexagram, it is also stated that one can't see the person at his courtyard. Who is this person? Why are all parts of his body needed to be steady or calm or still? Is it his heart being smoked? The whole hexagram does not make sense if it is interpreted according to Confucius and other eating experts since then. Now, let's see how Dr. Li interpreted the text about this hexagram. Dr. Li's interpretation only changes how he read the character 更. In addition to interpreter 更 as 木 plus 人, the character is also interpreted 木 or I plus 笔 or dagger, meaning to witness cutting off something. So, all you need to do is to replace stealing with cutting off, and you can get the gist of the meaning of this hexagram. So, Dr. Li interprets this character as to cut off something. I'm not going to read Dr. Li's new reading of the hexagram text here. If you would like to get the reading, please check out the members-only version of this video. It might be too much for the general audience. According to Dr. Li, the statements about the hexagram were compiled after Bo Yikao was sacrificed and King Wen had come back to his home at Zhou. He was working in Bo Yikao's old home and remembering the whole process of the sacrifice. The statement also implies that King Wen was pardoned because of the sacrifice of Bo Yikao, just like the sacrifice of Ziyang, recorded in a piece of oracle bone I talked about in my second video of this series. Bo Yikao was sacrificed to save his father. Hence, it is stated that no error is made, referring that their successful action of getting the acceptance from the Sun King. Carrying out the sacrifice without incident was an auspicious sign for signing the ceremony of joining the Shang kingdom, and King Wen finally got his title as Xibo, or the Marquis of the West, and was accepted as a member of the Shang kingdom. What a price to pay! Witnessing the sacrifice of Bo Yikao apparently had a huge impact on King Wen's two younger sons, King Wu Jifa and the Duke of Zhou Jidan. The Duke of Zhou was known for his constant vomiting at mealtime. It was reported that he often vomited 3 times during one meal. As you might know, the number 3 in Chinese text often is not literary. 3 simply means many. This means that Duke Zhou often vomited many times during one meal. The Grand Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian reported a speech by the Duke to his eldest son Bo Qin before the latter set off to govern the state of Lu. 我文王之子，武王之弟，成王之叔父。我于天下亦不见矣。然我一目散我发，一饭三吐哺。其以待世，犹恐是天下之贤人。子之鲁，甚无以国交人。I'm the son of King Wen, younger brother of King Wu, and the uncle of King Cheng. I'm not a person of low rank to anyone under the heaven. However, I dry my hair 3 times in one shower, spit out my food 3 times in one meal, so that I can greet a noble man with respect. But I still worry that I might lose someone of virtue. You are going to Lu. Be cautious and do not offend anyone with arrogance. This is how most Chinese historians explain the reasons that the Duke of Zhou spitting out his food many times during his meals. It is clear that the Duke of Zhou had this habit of spitting out the food, and it was widely known. Perhaps he also did it many times during state banquets with important guests. Otherwise, how would Sima Qian, who lived nearly 1,000 years later, knew about it? Apparently, spitting out food or vomiting during a meal is rather unusual behavior in most society, and would be regarded as very rude. If Duke of Zhou spit out food during a state banquet, it would be a diplomatic disaster. According to the earliest Chinese written history, Shang, or the Book of Documents, and Yi, or the Book of Etiquette, Duke of Zhou was the one laid out the law and code of conduct for the Zhou dynasty, and was also the one implemented the law and the code of conduct while consolidating the power of the newly established Zhou dynasty. How could such an authority figure keep on spitting out the food, or worse, vomiting during meals? It is clear that he could not control it, and King Cheng and the later Zhou kings needed an explanation for Duke Zhou's bizarre behavior. My guess is that the later kings of the Zhou dynasty made up the story of Duke Zhou's speech to his eldest son, and this was the story Sima Qian reported in his 史记, or the record of history. This interpretation of Duke Zhou's bizarre behavior became the official narrative by the Han Dynasty. One of the heroes or villains of the Three Kingdom period, Cao Cao, composed a poem alluring to this story in the line of 周公吐哺，天下归心. Duke of Zhou spit out his food, all hearts under the heaven went to him. I posted a video about Cao Cao and this poem. However, Duke Zhou's vomiting during mealtime could also be interpreted differently. According to Dr. Li Shuo, Duke Zhou's vomiting was a typical symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder after he witnessed his older brother's sacrifice and was forced to eat the flesh of his brother. Dr. Li Shuo also cited other textual evidence for this interpretation of Duke Zhou's behavior. That is, the bizarre behavior of King Wu Jifa recorded in history. The official history, such as Shiji, only made a few lines mentioning that King Wu had trouble sleeping and was sick quite seriously at one time. Duke Zhou was often called upon to counsel him and even helped King Wu to interpret his dreams. King Wu died just 2 or 3 years after he overthrew the Shang dynasty. However, Yi Zhou Shu, or the left-out Zhou history, has much more detailed records about the last 2 years of King Wu's life. It reports that King Wu often had nightmares. In the second year of King Wu's reign, one night he summoned Duke Zhou urgently, saying, 呜呼，于树叶地上不知道极，静听以勤天命. Oh, I worried about attacks from sun day and night. I don't know what is the outcome of our plan. I will listen to you with all respect, so that I can follow the mandate of heaven. Another entry states, 呜呼，谋谢在，今正物有伤鲸鱼，欲与无 something 者，欲攻无庸，以王不足，戒乃不兴，忧其深矣. Oh, our plot of overthrow Shang is leaked out. Now I woke up. It was the Shang who shocked me. I would like to surrender to the Shang King, but I have no one to pass on my message. I would like to attack Shang, but I have few followers. I don't have enough military force to declare as king. If I rebel, there might not be followers. My worry is so deep. Yi Zhou Shu, or the left-out Zhou history, includes many entries recording King Wu's nightmares about how he would fail in his endeavor of overthrowing the Shang King. Duke Zhou was often summoned to his bedchamber to comfort him. There is even a fake book in the title of 周公解梦, or Interpretation of Dreams by Duke Zhou, supposedly compiled by Duke Zhou. Dr. Li argued that King Wen's nightmare is also a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. I have to agree with Dr. Li's interpretation. The two brothers were both present at the ceremony of sacrificing Bo Yikao, and were both forced to eat their brother's flesh. They were probably in their late teens. I can't even imagine how terrified they would have been. Since King Wu died only 2 or 3 years after they overthrew the Shang, I'm sure it was Duke Zhou and his nephew, King Cheng, who initiated the process to erasing the Shang culture and promoted the Zhou culture as a new sociological structure. My next video for this series will focus on how King Wen and King Wu planned and carried out their mission of overthrowing the sun. I'm Dr. Gao, a philosopher specialized in classical Chinese philosophy and poetry, professional ethics, and philosophy of medicine. I make videos about the classical Chinese poetry, Chinese history and philosophies, and philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine. Please click the like button and subscribe my channel. Your support is very important to me. If you have any question, please contact me. Here's my email address. Thanks for watching my video. I'll see you next time.